Welcome to the Old Souls and Seekers podcast, a podcast that transcends the typical personal development journey. You're not new to this. You've read the books, attended the seminars, and perhaps even tried various coaching programs, yet something still feels amiss. Elon and Guy have over 2 decades of relentless searching and $1 million invested in their personal growth quest. Here's the revelation. You're not missing anything. You're not even behind. You might have just been searching in the wrong places. In each episode, we'll uncover the most effective, straightforward practices that have profoundly impacted our lives and the tens of thousands of our clients from all over the world. This is about real, sustainable results for those dedicated to their personal and spiritual growth. So get ready to explore and enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome in. Those of you that are here, feel free to say hi in the chat box. So I'm not sure what's going on. We have a unusually small number of people, so I'm not sure if the link didn't go up properly or what. But so if that's the case, and there's only a few of us here today, I'd love to hear from you guys instead of me going on some typical rant, like what is it that we can support you with, or what is it that I can support you with? So right now we have a pretty small crew in here, smaller than usual. So I'd love to have it then be more of a personal thing. But if you have any questions, an area of life that you'd love some feedback on, I'm happy to kind of talk to you more personally since it is a smaller group today. So why don't you have a quick think about it? If nothing kind of protrudes, then I would even invite us to maybe just sit in a group meditation together for like 10 minutes. And then maybe that's all we get to do today. So we'll just kind of flow with whatever happens here. No big deal. Hey, Bart. What's up, man? Hey, Laurie. Yeah, if you guys are just popping in, I don't need to sound like a parrot here, but we have a pretty small crew for what we normally have. So I probably won't do a whole dissertation, but I said I would be happy to take some personal questions, or if you want some area feedback, since it is a smaller group. And if not, in like a minute or two, I'll just set a 10-minute timer, do a silent meditation here for 10 minutes, and you guys are welcome to join me or go about your business, whatever feels good. Hey, Felicia, what's up? Awesome, Keisha. That's awesome. Congratulations. Was it scary to initiate the interview the first time, or did that feel natural for you? I totally get that. Yeah, she says she's apprehensive about interviewing her uncle. It's really all about setting the context the right way. Are you scared because of what you think he might say, or just asking in general for feedback from him is a scary proposition? Oh wow, that's awesome. Good for you. I really want to honor the courage it took to do that. For those who have or have not been in L1, who are listening, one of the exercises we do in there is a particular type of interview, and you ask a series of questions to get feedback, which in retrospect seems really, it can be super uncomfortable to approach a person in your life and ask them for that. But Keisha, you tell me from your personal experience, it's pretty different when you go in there asking through the lens that we offer, right? Versus just getting someone's kind of unintentional or uninitiated feedback. It's like we can really listen from a different place. And the beautiful part about these interviews is it really gives the person and you an opportunity to clear things that have been in the space for a long time. It's like the things that we want to say or have been unsaid or didn't even know that we needed to say. It usually creates a really beautiful healing space, not just for you, but also for them. And it just gets you into this kind of point of clarity and on the same level. And it's an exercise. You can do it again and again. I've done those interviews many times with my parents over the years. Hey, Megan, good morning. And it's never really that comfortable to ask. Having said that, the more you do them, I think some of the surprises is some of the great things people end up saying about you that either you wish people said or you didn't know that people even saw you that way. And that feels really, really good. Yeah. Yeah. So she's saying he usually gives unsolicited opinions. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those exercises that tends to be a surprise for people. And again, if you really give someone a stage and your full presence, what comes out of them tends to be potentially rather different than what we expected. And if they do say some negative things, usually it's said in a potentially less triggering way because they come from a more neutral place. When we give someone our opinion and we're not triggered while we're giving that opinion, it can come from a really different place. Like, obviously, the people in our lives are experiencing us in a particular way. Oftentimes, we're like stubbornly, holding on to some view of our identity, of our personality, how we'd like to be seen. I know certainly when somebody doesn't see me the way that I'd like to be seen, that's can be really triggering, right? Like really hit some parts in there. And that's in its own inherent way kind of a beautiful thing, because it gives us this opportunity to illuminate an aspect of ourselves. And to look, if something's triggering you, I think fundamentally we can say then you are not liberated and free from that particular thing. Yeah. That's awesome. And so even if it doesn't go well by our standards of what well might be, the opening that it can create for some transformation for ourselves is profound. And I think the real trick here is when you're doing this kind of exercise is dropping all expectation, which can be somewhat challenging, but it's really just observing our expectations of what we think they're supposed to say in that moment or how they react in that moment. Some people don't really say much at all, or some people just say the exact things that we thought they would say. But even if in the entire exchange, there's one golden nugget, it could be extremely profound and impact the relationship in either a positive way or just have clarity that it's potentially not a functional relationship and it's time to just kind of shift maybe, what's happening over there. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of the principal factors, right? So let me kind of take a step back. When we teach the work that we teach here, a profound realization that we had about 8 years ago is that the path, we can distinguish it in two particular ways, right? So Keisha, like what you're doing is what we would call the growing up path or the growing up work. Okay. Now you got to change your definitions here, because if I say you're not grown up or something like that, people will say, what do you mean? I'm an adult. I pay my bills, this, that, the other. But it's more of from the spiritual, energetic, mental perspective, right? Like we've all met a person who's potentially in their teens or in their early 20s who exudes a lot of wisdom, very grounded, and seems to just have this kind of worldly wisdom. We've all met like a 60 or 70-year-old who's like stubborn and kind of acts like a child, right? So wisdom, yeah, we could say there's certainly some wisdom we pick up as we get older and we have more life experience. I think that would be stupid to argue that. Having said that, there's like another form of wisdom, right? Which is like this spiritual wisdom, or like maybe what we would call street smarts. It's like just knowing how to get along in the world. And that has a kind of wisdom. When I started doing personal development work, and I'll get back to the two paths here in a second, I was 19 years old and I would be in these rooms with people who were often twice my age. And I intuitively knew to appreciate the profound transformational experiences I was having, even at 19 years old. But I can't tell you how many people who are 30, 40, 50 years old would walk up to me who were coming to the same realizations that I was at 19 years old. And they would say to me, you don't know how lucky you are. And I would say, why? They're like, because you're getting this when you're 19 years old. It's taken me another 30, 40 years to come to these realizations. And I've lived a lot of my life now. And so I've caused a lot of damage, and you get to kind of hopefully navigate that better. And that was a lot of feedback I got early on. I remember we took this 10-month long program when I was 21, and the agreement just to get into the program, you had to be minimum 23 years old. And the reason for that is that the human brain is actually not fully formed until roughly like 23 to 25 years old, which again, I know sounds crazy because we all think like our informative years, like our brain is fully developed, but it's not really true. A lot of the neuroplasticity that's set during that time, certainly, the foundation, that's the soil and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of us I think you would agree, in our teenage years, we don't really know who we are very well. We're kind of stepping into the world away from mom and dad. And so we become really impressionable, and our friends become the things that leave an impression on us. And a lot of us do experience some pretty deep trauma in our teenage years, and can make us kind of like pivot who we are, change our identity, play with it, things of that nature. For me, my teen years were extremely traumatizing, probably more than my formative years. So just to kind of go back to what I was saying here, we have these two paths, right? We have this growing up work, and growing up work is really about learning to take personal responsibility. And personal responsibility is the foundation of everything. If at the very least, if all we spent our entire life working on is what else could I take responsibility for, we would all immediately live higher quality lives than we do today. Now, that's not always an easy part, because our ego is deeply not committed to taking responsibility for things. It seems to be that its default nature is to want to blame or externalize. And I say that as a default nature because perhaps it's not its default nature, and perhaps that's just how we're programming or conditioning our ego to react. But having said that, in the world that we know, in the most experience that we're having, it's like we will stubbornly defend our belief systems, stubbornly defend that we're victims of our circumstances, things of this nature. And again, for those of you guys who are in L1 or have taken that program, just as a reminder here, saying that you're responsible for everything doesn't make it true. No more than saying that somebody is a victim and is not taking responsibility for anything is true. These are lenses to look through. They are perspectives to investigate and get curious about, and to just take a look at which life produces a higher quality of life. Because what I'm always interested in is, how do I liberate myself? How do I diminish or end suffering in any and all areas of my life? And how do I live the highest quality life possible, right? Because if we're going to continue to play our lives, if we're going to continue to do this life thing, pretending like this is a practice life, and I'm just practicing now, I'll get to it, one day, someday. For most people that I've come across, that is the context through which they live their life. It's like they have all the time in the world, and whatever's going right now, like, I'll just get to the stuff that I really care about. And so decades go by this way, and people never quite get to it. And we have evidence for this because when they talk to people who are on their deathbeds or terminally ill and are facing death, the reports are tragically the same almost across the board. There's two things that people really care about at the end of life. They say that, number one, they didn't regret things they've done. They regretted the things that they haven't done. That's a huge one. And the second one is that they live their life to make everyone else happy, not ever truly making themselves happy. And both those things exist in like the 95th percentile. So you might get curious, because this is how I made a lot of changes in my life too. If like you put your head down on your pillow tonight, and these were your last moments on earth, and you had to ask yourself those questions, like, what is it that I regret that I haven't done? And just maybe let that just come to mind right now. Like, what is that thing? And then take a look if the way you've been off putting that thing is as if like, oh, I'll just get to that later. So right now, let me just practice until I'm ready to do that thing. And again, I can only speak from anecdotal evidence here. Not that I have like direct lineage, proof to this, but Elon and I were part of an affiliate network for many years where we would bring people in who wanted to leave their 9-to-5 jobs, who wanted to learn online marketing and learn automation and all these kind of things. And that's how we got started with this company too. In 2011, we were in commercial financing up until the collapse in 2008. By 2010, Elon and I lost everything. And in 2011, January, it was my first introduction into online marketing. I had been following this guy. He was emailing me every day. I literally didn't look at a single email. I put everything in spam. And then like one day, I don't know why, right? Like when you're looking, it just kind of appears. I happened to open an email. He probably had been sending me emails for like 6 months at that point in time. And I could see that he was kind of like, living on beaches and doing this and that. And I had never really thought about doing business online. Like that was a really foreign concept to me. But what I realized as I approached it is that I wanted that lifestyle. I wanted to really not wake up to an alarm clock, to kind of make my own time. I was sure when I started this whole online business thing that I would become a millionaire in like the first 5 months. That did not happen, by the way. It took a great deal of effort to build anything that mattered. But within about a 12-month period, Elon and I became some of the top producers in that organization. And I'm sharing that with you for a few reasons. First is I saw so many people come in to that organization that we introduced to that organization under those same premises, that like they realized that life had gotten away from them. They had been working a job 20, 30, 40 years. They didn't have really any freedom, any time freedom, any money freedom, and they wanted to set themselves up to do something different. And so this seemed like a skill set that they wanted to acquire. And that makes sense. And yet, when people would get into the business, most people would do very little with it, even if they had invested a great deal of money to be there. Okay, so like people could have invested as little as like $500 to get in there. Some people invest as much as $40,000. And it really just depended on the type of experience that you want, right? Like how much education you wanted, how much support you wanted from the company, this, that, the other. So I'll spare you all the details, but just to give you some context here. And so Elon and I were introducing people to that business model. And what we found over and over again was that the people who didn't have a context for personal responsibility and the fundamentals of growing Upwork, generally speaking, did not do well. Did not do well. Those that had more of that context usually took a lot more decisive action in the business. And the reason Elon and I became top producers in that company, and also remained top producers in that company for 4 to 5 years. And I don't know how many of you guys have checked out the new training in your members area. I'd love to actually get your feedback on that. I put together a free training over there on how to make more money. It's just like a strategy that I've been applying to my own life, to our own business that's doing really, really well. I've seen a lot of people do well with it. And we could talk about that too, but I'd love to know if you've checked it out. And that was like a regular occurrence, right? So what we saw was that people would start a thing. They were basically saying, I'm going to jump into this vehicle. I'm going to have this experience. And then, of course, the vehicle, right now you have this relationship with this business that you're creating, which is basically like raising a child, essentially, in its own different way. And what that vehicle will do is show you all the cracks, right? Because everywhere where things aren't working, it feels the same. It's like, oh, this has always happened to me. Oh my God, here's another thing that's just going the same way that it's always gone. Or I don't know why people don't connect with me when I get on the phone with them. Or, like all these different things that we feel potentially inadequate in are going to show up in the business. So you could say, hey, the business is not working. Or you can say the business is the perfect lens for me to look through to see where I get to do work. But fundamentally, again, people who knew how to take responsibility are also people who then look for solutions much faster. It tends to be that those that don't take responsibility will procrastinate or avoid really taking action. And then they feel like they need inspiration or motivation to do something, right? Like I could tell you, for me, I have not felt, since I graduated college and got introduced to personal development work, I honestly, outside of just being like just exhausted, tired, fine, that makes sense. But like I've never had to find motivation or inspiration for what I do. I hope that makes sense. And I don't want to make it seem like I have found some secret sauce or anything like that. That's not true. It's just that I genuinely enjoy what I do. So when people are like a job they hate, and then they go, I don't know, I just want to find some motivation. I'm like, you're just not going to find it. There's no alignment in what you're doing. It's the same thing in a relationship. Like, I want to be here, but it's not working, or whatever it is. Like, okay, either you can do the work and see how that goes, but if you're not feeling motivated to take action in an area of your life, generally speaking, you're just not excited about it. I've been working out since I was 14 years old. I haven't needed ever motivation to get in the gym. I genuinely love going to use my body and working out. And so that part of my life feels relatively easy, where for a lot of people, that's not the case. And I think, look, either you build that habit and you genuinely find the love in what you're doing because you experience it, as loving yourself, right? And if I'm not doing that, then I'm not loving myself. So for me, it's always been like, where can you find challenges that you really enjoy? And the truth is, nothing happens overnight. Like there's nothing happening overnight. So Sally's asking a question about alignment and how can we find it. I think that's a good question, and I want to say, like, to some degree, it's in alignment. Sorry for the pun here. In alignment with what I said about inspiration and motivation. I wouldn't spend too much of my time trying to dawdle and figure out what my alignment is, because I feel like it's a little bit amorphous. It's ambiguous. Like, there are certain words that people throw around, us included, by the way, like alignment and process, like you're being, processing yourself or something like that. You're in a process. And what I found over the years is, like, those things just kind of take shape on their own as you do the work. Because what might feel like an alignment for you today may not feel like an alignment for you tomorrow. And you guys are doing this type of work, and I really mean it this way. Like, to me, this is the absolution of the truth that I've been able to come to. So it's not absolute truth, but absolute truth where I'm at today. This work is like ladders of frequencies. We're always stepping into a new frequency. You guys are going to continue to do work and suddenly find, not that necessarily your mindset has changed, like that will eventually just dawn on you that, like, you just don't think the way that you used to. You don't have to work on that, but like you'll hit some point and you'll be like, whoa, that feels different. Now, sometimes it feels different, and then you kind of slip back into old patterns. That happens to me. It's happened to everybody I've ever worked with. It happens to every teacher I've ever worked with, right? Like, we can't suffer, or we can't bring more. I mean, we can. It's not useful to bring more suffering towards yourself when you backslide a little bit. I like to think of this work as 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Because we generally take a big step forward and then we don't have enough resource or stability in the system to hold that frequency yet. But it's like, oh, but we get a glimpse of that frequency. We get a glimpse of that consciousness. We're like, whoa, wow, yes, this feels so good. And then something happens, we get a little bit of a slide back. If we can not make that slide back wrong, but just recognize that that's part of the process of stepping into this new thing. And now now you've glimpsed it. Now you're in a process of stabilizing. So now that you've seen it, now it's like, okay, usually once you've seen it, you either recognize where you sit in your awareness. Okay, there, I found it. Or there's some sort of practice that opened that up for you. And now it's like, yeah, I love that. So it's like where you rest in your system, essentially, right? And we can say, again, different frequencies, different vibrations. You could just hold it. And so now you're kind of like resting in this new place in your system. And so it's like, now it's a new view. Oh, from here, now I watch again. Now, when I watch, I'm inevitably going to see what I just saw a moment ago. The circumstances haven't changed yet. Maybe I'm still looping in something, so I'm viewing from there. But the opportunity now is to view from that new resting spot, if that makes sense. And as I view from that resting spot, I'm glimpsing. Oh, I got a part got hit. I'm in a process. Great. I glimpse from here. I glimpse from this new place. Awesome. Cleared. And I do that. And then eventually there's this stability. Now, stability, maybe it happens in the moment. Like, it probably gets that way. But my experience has been like, there's this pop. I feel this new thing. I don't even have language to articulate what this new thing is. I just know it doesn't feel like it felt before. It's like a new feeling that I have now, new place that I rest in my consciousness. Like, the last 2 months, my meditations are so deep. Like, I am just losing track of time constantly. This has never happened to me before. I've always been a with it meditator. Very rarely did I go into these deep states where I just lose all sense of space time. And suddenly it's happening like 95% of the time when I meditate. I'm just out. And then something brings me back, right? So just to kind of go back to the question here. So alignment, motivation, inspiration, are these things that we need to work on and like actually have them in our purview? I don't think so. I think we can just kind of hold it. We can hold the intention to be in alignment. And when you hold the intention to be in alignment, there's this place, right? When we're in alignment, I can speak to the qualities of what I would offer is alignment. Alignment is this feeling of restfulness and spaciousness. I'm rested. My mind is generally pretty clear. Like there's not a lot of noise around me. And then the spaciousness is, I mean that in a literal way. Like the mind and its conditioning has a kind of density that we talk about, and you can feel the quality of this density. In our last level 3 call, we really spent a lot of time investigating qualities and configurations. And I started explaining how we can actually feel into our energetic configurations. Okay. And I'm not going to go into too much of detail here because I want to stay on topic. But it's like, so your alignment has these certain qualities. And so when the quality changes and it gets more dense again, there's a collapse in my system. These things have become so apparently clear to me that the subtle nature of shifting in and out of alignment is what you will get hopefully proficient at over the next few years. Okay. It's not something that's going to happen overnight because most of us have been living so far out of alignment for so long that feels like our normal state. And it takes quite a bit of practice to have contrast and experience. If, you know, we used to have a mentor that used to say, if you stand in shit long enough, it stops smelling like shit. Which is another way to say, when you've been in your suffering for so long, it literally just kind of like disappears and echoes into the unconscious background of your life. And you live in the suffering as if that's normal because you've normalized it. And so I work with this really beautiful healing practitioner who does this practice called fascial counterstrain. He's probably one of the most brilliant people in medical healing or somatic healing that I've ever met in my entire life. Really mind-blowing stuff. And his name is Kyle. And Kyle told me when I first started working with him, he said, pain is normal. He goes, but chronic pain is not normal. He said, we've normalized chronic pain. He's like, nobody should be in chronic pain. He goes, when the body's in alignment, it always heals itself. Cool. I want to work with a person who has that foundation of belief and alignment in their system when they're doing work on me. And I have to agree. You know, I think as long as you can put the body into that state, generally speaking, if you're living in a state of constant pain, it's more of an indicator of something, but eventually you'll take that pain, you'll just kind of live with it. It'll be in the background and you'll normalize it. So with this work, we always talk about contrast, that the human being learns through contrast. Right. You can see all in society how we kind of stretch the edges of contrast, and then the pendulum swings until we find our center. And so alignment is just kind of something that happens in time. And if we try to identify what anything is and give it a clear definition today, maybe today that's a great and working definition for you that gives you access to something. But tomorrow, that definition, or at least the story you have about that definition, could become a huge crux. We used to say that yesterday's breakthrough becomes tomorrow's ego trip. Because when we have a breakthrough, that feeling of self-realization has us think, oh, now I know something. And inside of that knowing, we create an expectation. And when we create an expectation, I can tell you the clock is now ticking. Disappointment is on the way. It's inevitability. You're gonna suffer in some particular way. So maybe you have that breakthrough and you're like, that's how I'm going to be from now on. Forever I'll be that way, right? And so you kind of, any other experience, you either hold it at bay or you try to continue to pull that experience towards you. And ultimately, things are going to shift and change because that's the nature of reality, is to be temporal, is to constantly be in shift and flux and motion. This work is not about making you into something so like strong and stubborn and you know, that like nothing phases you anymore. If you just, you know, try to build yourself as something super strong, like pressure is going to come. It's going to break that eventually. You know, the experience of life is so powerful. Like you're gonna have challenges. It's gonna push back on that. So it's really not about becoming this all-powerful being. It's really about learning how to be fluid with life, fluid with our emotions, fluid with how things enter our experience and how to actually be with them in a way that doesn't cause more suffering as it's received in the body. And for many of us, that's really what's happening. We're having these experiences. We don't know how to be with them, or we've built up these very, very strong protectors that don't allow for that experience to move through our system. And so we create internal suffering where something may have been difficult to go through, but it becomes, 10x, 100x, 1000x more difficult when it's met through this lens of judgment that most of us have internally. So we say this a lot, but it's like, safety, well-being, authentic connection, alignment, motivation, inspiration. These are not things that you need to worry about or really work on. We talk about them a lot because they're really, really important. Having said that, I haven't had to focus on any of those aspects to cultivate more of those in my life. Those things just naturally arise within your experience as you turn within and do these exercises in the way that we're pitching them to you guys, because that's what really, really took us a long time to realize is how do we meet it? Now, how do we manage it? Now, how do we cope it? And how do we try to overcome it? Which is so much of the work I did for so long. And that's why for us, we tell you guys, we're like, that part's important, but it's like every part is important when in that moment. And then it's like the next moment, it's like, can you let it go? Can you actually take the importance off of it? Now, I'm not saying that responsibility is not important or integrity is not important or anything else like that is not important. And again, these are just words that we're using to try to identify certain qualities. Having said that, if you become like an integrity police for yourself and everyone around you, you're not going to live a joyous life. So you could take something that fundamentally is actually really important and very empowering, and you could turn it into something really ugly. And I'm speaking from personal experience because when I was 19, I was very naive. When I did this work, like many of us, we're very naive. We're having these big experiences. Oh my God, realizations. We suddenly feel like we know something. And so we feel to some degree, hey, okay, well, I want to help other people in my life, my family. And there's almost like an entitlement phase that some of us go through. I know I did, where it's like you start forcing these conversations and these beliefs on other people with the best of intentions. You want them to experience love. You want them to experience connection. You want them to experience freedom, right? And so, your ego, your righteousness can grab onto these concepts, these distinctions, and they're very powerful. And you can use them to cause harm. You can use it to manipulate people and kind of run circles around their psychology. I really recommend that you do not do that. It will ruin your relationships. It will ruin your relationships. Be very mindful of being like a soapbox, coach, or giving people advice or soliciting any sort of advice to people that is not warranted or wanted. Like, Keisha, when you're doing an interview, or if anybody else has done these interviews, like that's the difference. The biggest difference there is you're asking. When you ask, you can sit in preparation. You can prepare yourself like, okay, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to let them speak. I'm not going to interfere. And like all that stuff makes a really big difference. And if you really get that this interview is as much for them as it is for you, it's an opportunity to clear the air, to change the quality of the density that's normally there. There could be a huge sigh of relief for both parties at the end of this. It's really an opportunity to forgive. And I really want to remind you guys that, when you're practicing forgiveness, you're forgiving somebody. That act is for you. It's not for them.
Are you feeling inspired by these podcasts? Is this approach striking a chord with you? Imagine taking this journey even further with personal coaching from Guy and I, right from your own home on Zoom. Join us at our next live event. They happen quarterly. It's an accessible, cost-effective way to dive deep into these transformative practices, not just theoretically, but experientially. Attendees often share that they've experienced unprecedented levels of peace, support, forgiveness, and awareness. Remember, healing isn't just a mental exercise. It must be felt and released through the body. So here's a special gift just for you, our valued listener. Visit intuitivemind.live and use the coupon code OLDSOUL to receive 25% off your ticket. The Intuitive Mind event is unlike any other. So impactful that many participants return multiple times, some as many as 10, 12, even 15 times. Plus, once you register, we'll immediately send you a recording of a previous event so that you can start practicing right away. Don't miss this opportunity. Go to intuitivemind.live, secure your spot for our next live event using the coupon code OLDSOUL, and start your transformative journey today. Now, back to the show.
So when you're forgiving somebody, excuse me, that act is for you. It's not for them. One second. Because when we don't forgive people, we're the ones carrying around the weight of that debt. You know, when you forgive someone a debt, like if Sally owed me $10,000 or something like that, and I said, you know what, Sally, I forgive that debt. Guess what? I don't get to use that against her anymore. I don't get to hold that over her head anymore. I'm giving that up, but I'm also energetically carrying that around. And, you know, we had this old saying that's like, you drink the poison and hope that somebody else dies. It doesn't work that way. You're drinking the poison. You're going to be at the effect of it. You're going to be the one suffering. So forgiveness is an act. It's a discipline. It's a real discipline. And again, you know, these interviews are a way to bring yourself to a place where you're like, okay, am I going to forgive this? And it's always a choice. It's always a choice to make with somebody. And sometimes it's not an easy one because a lot of stuff comes up. You're like, what if I'm not able to protect myself or hold this against this person anymore? What does that mean for the nature of a relationship? But what has always worked for me, and this works in terms of our righteousness and stubbornness and trying to hold on to what we think is the right way to do things as well, because being right is a total addiction. What we always get to recognize with holding stuff like that, with trying to be right about stuff, not forgiving people for potentially very difficult things that have been done to you in those relationships, what we get to realize is, okay, what am I actually committed to with this relationship? Am I committed to having a more loving relationship? Hopefully the answer is yes. More vitality and vivaciousness in the relationship? Hopefully the answer is yes. More connection, more love, more, you name it. Like, what's the things you guys want in your relationships? What's the thing you want in your relationship with yourself? What's the thing you want in the relationship to the world? And I promise you, if you really get curious, you'll find out that the things that you're holding on to and being right about are the reason that you don't have those things in that relationship. So they may have really done something wrong to you. Like, it really may have been that painful. Okay. And that's already happened. And look, if you're in a relationship where those things are continuously happening, it's super toxic, you know, whatever it might be, like, you can certainly try it. But like, if, you know, having these conversations and clearing and doing all that stuff, but if you're not making ground in that way, you really need to consider that to some extent, when you're doing healing work, but you continue to be in a toxic environment, that's like going to the gym 7 days a week, but I eat a cake at the end of every workout. Like, I'm not going to make any headway because I continue to be in an environment that's not conducive for rest and healing and all the other stuff. Like, it's very difficult to do anything when you're in a fight or flight experience all the time. Like, it's unlikely, even with meditation, even if you taste a little bit of rest, but then, you know, you do a 5-minute meditation, you feel relaxed, but the moment you open the door, it's just fucking chaos and you're back into this toxic environment. Like, it's going to be pretty tough to make headway in that environment. I think you guys would agree with that. So, you know, all these things, you know, forgiveness, responsibility, integrity. And the one thing is that when we practice these things externally, when we give up being right, when we give up, you know, we're going to say we're going to forgive in this relationship so that you can have all the things that you want. Even though you're practicing out here a lot of times linguistically and the conversations and stuff, you're also giving that back to yourself. Because there's stuff that we've done too that we don't forgive ourselves for, that we hold on to and we feel like we're right about. And then again, if you want like vitality, energy, vivaciousness, creativity, I mean, the works, right? All the things that I think most of us would put on a list of like things that we value and are important to us. I'm going to offer again, whatever it is that you're being right about internally is also taking that away from you. And it might be like being right about being unworthy, or being right about like, I never get it right, or being right about that you're always scared, or, whatever it is that you've created a story around that I know feels very real and it's super seductive. At the end of the day, one of the first things you can play with is like, can I stop being right about that thing? Because what's the impact of that on my life? How does that impact my life when I hold on to being right about that thing? And if I drop that, okay, well, let's imagine me without that. What's possible for me if I didn't live in that story? And if I change it, okay, then what would be the impact on me with this other story in play? And again, that doesn't make this new story true. But here's the reality. The old story is not true either. You've just been telling that story over and over again for so long that you're intimate with that story. There are certain stories that I share that I had probably been sharing for like 20 years. Now, hopefully I do a good job and I generate it like it's the first time I'm telling the story every single time. So there's like a connection to it. But, like there's so many things that I used to say to myself on a regular basis that have shifted now. And it had to just start with that first small step. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to indulge in that story anymore. And at first it's exciting. And then it's really challenging because you're like, oh, great. I won't do that anymore. Then you find yourself saying that story saying that story again. And that's where you got to bring your integrity into play. My integrity is what I give my word to. So if I'm saying to myself, I'm not going to do that anymore, that's an agreement I have with myself. I'm not going to eat that anymore. I'm going to start exercising 3 to 5 times a week. Like that's what integrity is, right? Integrity is not about this like moral compass that people think that it is. Okay. When somebody applies their morality to you and tries to hold your feet to a fire, it's not really integrity. Because if you didn't give your word to doing that thing, you didn't give your word to that. So there's no agreement there. And so there's no break or breach of integrity. The only things that you can break your integrity on is what you've given your word to and the agreements that you've made. And you can always clean that stuff up, by the way. That's the whole conversation about level 1 is how do you clean that stuff up? Because the one most correlated word to integrity is workability. It's workability. If there's no integrity, you do not have workability. Things will not work in your life with a lack of integrity. And it's really, really simple. You just think of a metaphor of like a bicycle wheel that has all the spokes in it. If we start to break the spokes in the wheel, at first, let's take out just like 2 or 3 spokes. The wheel is still actually going to spin. But when you get to the part that the spokes have been broken, it's going to require more effort to get that wheel around. It's going to be a flat spot. And we've all ridden a bike that has a flat spot or a flat tire. It's not easy to ride that bike. It jiggles, it wiggles. It requires more effort for us to move it around, right? But you keep breaking the spokes. Eventually you have a flat wheel. The wheel lacks integrity and will now no longer move forward. And that, to me, that's the correlation of why you want to do integrity work, why you want to do the growing up path, why you want to clean stuff up in your life, why you want to clean up the stuff in your relationships. Because guess what? The relationship has no integrity, no workability if you don't do that. And so if you're in a relationship and it's looping, you get into the same issues over and over and over again, lack of integrity. Now, certainly could that other person clean up their integrity with you and make it work again? Probably. But are you, we were just talking about living your life like a practice life earlier on, waiting for stuff. You might wait till your fucking deathbed to hear the words that you want to hear out of that person's mouth. I don't know about you. I would rather be the one that takes responsibility and have a working relationship that like works across the board. And then also know, because I was the courageous one to open my mouth and take responsibility, this relationship works now. Incredible. And that's what responsibility does. I mean, I don't think we've trained on this stuff in years, but the average person's story or architecture around what responsibility is, especially when it comes to relationships, is it's 50-50. I do my part, you do your part, right? Fine. Okay, that makes perfect logical sense. It really does, right? It's an intact, logical story to have that they should do their part, you should do yours. But what happens with a 50-50 relationship? Well, eventually somebody breaches integrity, right? They don't do the thing that you thought they're supposed to do. You don't do the thing that they thought they thought you were supposed to do. And you get in an argument. And now, because both parties are 50% responsible, what you have is a stalemate. Because you want the other person to take responsibility. And what do they want? What do they want? They want you to take responsibility, but nobody does, because they're like, shit, when you do, I will, right? How many of you guys, just say yes in the chat box, have been in situations like that with people or with a loved one? You tell me if that works. You just sit there forever waiting for the other person to do the thing that you want them to do. And they're waiting simultaneously for the same thing. I don't know about you, but that feels like a giant waste of time. And in the meantime, what you really desire, what you're really seeking, in my opinion, is connection with that person, like authentic connection, especially if you're with like a partner and that happens and that falls out. Like what we're arguing about, what people are generally arguing about, is underneath it all is two scared children trying to find a way to get back into connection. That's it. That's what every argument is. Just two people trying to get back into connection with each other. And in the work that we do here, here's the beauty. You don't need to talk to get back into connection with people. You can just drop into state, go into a presence process with them, like minis or other practices, and you will find yourself back in connection with them. And then the moment you're back in connection with them, you're going to find the strangest thing happens. The thing that you cared about so much, so stubbornly cared about, just maybe minutes before, suddenly you don't care about it at all. It's almost irrelevant. Now you can recreate it if you want, say it again, and it'll probably disconnect you guys, but like it almost becomes irrelevant, because you realize what fell out was safety, what fell out was connection. So if you just put safety and connection back in, suddenly the things that seem so important suddenly don't feel that important. And we do this exercise in the live event with complaining, where we show the contrast between complaining through the conditioned mind or then going into awareness, and suddenly people are like, I don't even want to complain. I'm like, yep, because your awareness doesn't care about that stuff. That's just ego-driven human conditioning stuff. And it does not live at the frequency and level of awareness. And so people find it very difficult to complain from that place. So 50-50 doesn't work. And so what does is radical responsibility, where you stop seeing your relationship to the world and to other people as a 50-50 agreement, and you start seeing as what it really is, which is 100% with you and 0% with whatever's out there. And when you take that 100-0 approach, even in, again, to use like a loving or romantic relationship here as a metaphor, then when things go awry, you are usually the first one that comes to the table and says, you know what, I'm really, really sorry for that thing that I said. I said that out of anger, or I said that out of fear, or out of a part. And that's not what I'm committed to. And here's the thing I am committed to. And again, you just name it, right? Like that's all it requires, is you to name it, not to blame yourself, not to shame yourself, not to guilt yourself. It's just to name it and say, hey, I'm not committed to that. And I had a moment there and I'm really, really sorry. Here's what I'm committed to now. And you can hold me to that. And that's where you make an agreement. That's where you give your word to something. And it now it lives in this world of what we call integrity. And now you may breach that integrity because you're a human being. And we do strange stuff when we're scared or worried or we get hurt. Like we say things we don't mean, we try to, we close up, or we try to hit back, or whatever it might be. You're not alone in doing that. Like, I really want you to get that. You're not on this island that you're the only person that does that. Everybody does that. Everybody. And there's no issue with that other than not cleaning it up after it happens. That's what creates the issue. You might have to clean stuff up 100 times, 1,000 times. And that's just the nature of growing up work. When you guys start getting into our more advanced work, L2s, L3s, the stuff we do at the Intuitive Mind event, that stuff is the awakened work. It's where you've already set now, you've cleaned things up. The foundation is clean, right? That's what you're doing. It's like if we buy a property, we buy a lot, and it's just dirty everywhere. Before we build anything on there, we got to grade the land and we got to clean it up. Otherwise, the home or whatever we decide to build on that property is going to have no integrity. It's going to fall. It's no different. The growing up work is about setting the foundation. It's about cleaning stuff up and making that foundation really, really rock solid, strong. And it's about giving you a certain type of framework to think through and have insight around the chess match that your mind is playing with you. Because your mind is the grand master of this machine, and it knows how to play you. It is extremely seductive at the games that it plays. It knows exactly how to push the buttons. It knows exactly how to get its way. And so why become aware? Because we need to become aware of the mechanism. We need to see how the levers are being pulled. Because when we can see how the levers are being pulled, it puts us at a place to make a choice. And sometimes you choose to still do the machinery. You still choose to merge into the consciousness and do all the crazy stuff that ego does. It happens. Sometimes you're not even aware that you have that choice. Okay, that happens too. You know, and whatever's going on, and, you know, Annabelle, you know, hopefully, you know, I know for a fact this community can support you. And I'm sorry that it feels that way in the moment, right? Because when we've been in something for a long time, it feels like it's dragging on forever. The energy of depression and sadness is I show this at the Intuitive Mind event. That frequency makes us feel like we're in something forever. I want you to know there is a way out of that trap, but there's nobody here that can, quote, save you. Not me, not Sally. We can empathize with your story. It's like the work every single one of us gets to do is this deep curiosity work, right? This deep work of inquiry within ourselves to ask ourselves sometimes very difficult questions and then just sit with them and see what arises. And so these programs are about giving you guys a certain type of map, a certain type of framework through which to continue to optimize what you're doing. I've now seen this over and over again, whether it's in business and sales and marketing, anywhere. Like, we all need to find a framework that works for us. Like, I'll tell you this, like in our company, Elon is just kind of like a natural salesman, right? He's very good at connecting with people. It's just what he does in his life. I don't mean sales. I mean, he's like a people person. And that quality translates really well into the world of sales, right? And so for those of you guys who connected with him, and he's like very inspiring and he's got a lot of energy, and like, that's not my roadhouse, by the way. Like, I do things, I have natural gifts elsewhere, but like I could do that. But for him, that's just how he kind of came into this world. Now, we've had, you know, issues for years of people coming into our place doing sales on our team and not being able to duplicate nearly as much of production as he can produce, right? So why is that? Well, I would say for a lack of a system. So eventually, which has really been just this last year or so, Elon finally found some framework through which he could take what he did really well in conversations with people and start applying some kind of framework on it so that he was clear when something wasn't working, how to optimize it and how to shift and change it. And the moment he started doing that, it started becoming a duplicatable framework that other people could follow, and we could continue to optimize. And we've seen a lot of growth in our organization because of that optimization. And so it's the same thing with L1, L2, L3, right? These are ways of viewing things. They're not the only ways of viewing things, and they're probably not the only right ways of viewing things. However, in our 21 years of experience, after doing so many things and putting over $1 million into our education, we tried so many damn things. And the reality was there was very few things that were really impactful. Very few. Most of it is just noise. You barely remember. But there's a few things that you're like, whoa, when I do that systematically every time, it gets better. And then you optimize that in your experience. And so everything that we've put together in these programs is a dissemination. It's like a boiling down. It's like we tried to look at everything that was just fluffy and like made people kind of feel good and inspire them, but then ultimately really transform their life. Again, we've been working with people for 18 years. So we've really seen it. You do this, okay, it's kind of okay. You do this, whoa, like huge change. And a lot of you guys, you know, it's awesome to watch because we see you benefiting from not doing so many dumb things that we did and just really focusing on the small little things that we can each do every single day, hopefully without overwhelming ourselves, to just make a little bit of headway every single day. We used to have a teacher, they say inch by inch is hard. Inch by inch is a cinch, yard by yard is hard. Meaning if you just focus on the thing right in front of you, just work on that, you're moving that 1%. You just keep moving that 1%. And for those of us who are in this, I got to change everything, it's got to be this big change right away or nothing at all, you're kind of missing the point. Like really good work is very subtle. It's very subtle. It's really in these like subtle moments with yourself, subtle moments with your children, subtle moment with your spouse where you find yourself, they say that thing and you're at peace. It's a little chaotic, but you're grounded, you're aligned, you respond from presence. Like, to me, that's everything. It's not about the big things. Those are great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, but those are just dopamine hits. Yeah, and Megan said, relational versus transactional sales. I agree, right? Like, you can feel the difference between somebody trying to hypnotize you into buying something versus somebody trying to like serve you, like being with you and actually serving you. And so at the end of the day, it's like, can you focus on the subtle stuff? If like there's a lot of negative chatter in your mind, okay, then forget everything else and just start noticing the negative chatter. Forget trying to create the end result that you think you're supposed to get to when all the chatter stops. And just be with, for the next 2 weeks, negative chatter. And what you want to notice in that noticing is that you are not the negative chatter. You want to notice that you are the one that's observing the negative chatter. And as you observe that you're not the one generating negative chatter just seems to be generated. Right? Some conditioning is generating that, and there seems to be no source of it of any kind. It's like clouds in the sky appearing and disappearing. But as you start recognizing and viewing and glimpsing that you're not that chatter, this magical thing will happen where you'll start generating a spaciousness between you and the chatter. And as you do that, and you become more of the observer, the power that the chatter has lessens and lessens and lessens and lessens and lessens, because you get clear that I'm just the one observing. And so the chatter might keep happening, but it's losing its power over you. Because the only way that chatter can have power over you is if you merge your consciousness and actually believe that this thing is happening, that this thing is going on. And that's all you do. And you will start making that inch by inch headway. If you try to bring it all into cohesion at one time, it can be rather overwhelming, right? And so it's like, the modules, if I could say it this way, are built and designed in a really specific way and in a really specific order. And so you may want to, even if you guys are in L2 or L3, go back to L1 if you feel like inclined to do that and watch those things, because maybe you'll see them from a new set of eyes. Like every time I did programs like that over and over again, I was like, whoa, totally missed out the first time, totally missed out the second time, because you're changing, you're transforming, you're listening different, you're seeing things differently. And when you've cleaned up a lot of stuff, you can really be present with work. You're like, damn. I went through, a mystery school the first 2 years, and it was all about trying to understand the energetics and the awareness and healing and this and that. I did it the second time around. I didn't even listen to what the teacher was saying. It was irrelevant to me. The content did not matter at all. I realized we were in a field of energy and consciousness. This teacher had cultivated 50 years worth of meditative practices, was aligned to a different frequency and energy that very few people on this planet have. And just being in that field of energy is the teaching. It's mind-blowing when you're like, I don't even have to pay attention. I can fall asleep here. But as long as I'm in my open awareness, the system is learning. It's so powerful. Now, that might feel really advanced and far away for some of you guys, which is totally fine. But that's why I'm telling you, we have these two pathways, right? Again, just to clarify, the growing up and the waking up work. But the waking up can be very challenging for people if the foundation's not set. So it's okay if you want to just look, L1 right now is designed as a year-long program. There's I believe 7 modules back there. You can sit with one module for quite a bit of time. You just do the math, right? divide 12 by 7, whatever that ends up being, like 1.7 or whatever it is. So you can almost spend 2 months on a single module for the rest of the year. And if that's all you decided to do with us and decided to do in this community and just master that one thing, I believe that if you spent the next 6 weeks focused on one thing, your life is going to completely change. Because every single one of those modules is a type of practice that we get to master. And mastery simply means it goes from being a thought that you have and something you have to presence on a regular basis to something that autonomously happens all the time. For those of you guys who are doing our more advanced work and you're waiting for this moment where it just kind of like settles, eventually you can see you just keep doing the reps, keep doing the reps, keep doing the reps. It's very logical. Eventually you won't have to think about it. It just, your body just does it. Your consciousness just does it. It just grounds itself. It just sits in this rested stability. And that's really only happened to me in the last 12, 18 months in my own experience. And now it's just deepening and deepening and deepening and deepening, and this settling and this resting and this settling and this resting. There is no end in sight. It is an infinite expanse into well-being and safety and connection and all these things that you guys want to have in your life. And the one thing that's required of you is your vigilance and commitment to showing up and practicing. Elon and I are not special. We're not doing anything special. We're not holding anything back from you. There's no secret at the end of the rainbow. The one thing that makes us stand out from most people I've been around is our absolute commitment to our liberation, our growth, and the end to our suffering. That's it. That is from where I make the decisions in my life and choices in my life from. I'm like, does this contribute to my liberation, to the end of the suffering, and to a higher quality of life? If the answer is yes, I will figure out how to do it, even if it's beyond my means to do so. Okay? So the one thing I'll end it with that. And then the one thing I just want to offer, just so you guys are going to give you a huge runway with this, but our next live event is on September 14th and 15th, post-summer, because summer just tends to be a busy time for everybody. Elon's away, obviously. So you have quite a bit of time. But if you don't have intuitive mind, if you have not been to one of those live events yet, please come. They're incredible, life-changing. And the cool part is, if the moment you buy your live event ticket, we will give you a digital recording of a previous event. So you can actually start going through the work today, like immediately. So you can click that button that's on your screen right now, or go to intuitivemind.live. And in the coupon section, if you put in live 25, it will give you a 25% off and save you some money on that ticket. Those events are amazing. I expect the September event will probably be the largest event that we've ever held. So like, it's just so incredible to be with you guys and to share in that experience. And the bigger the collective, the more potent the energy. And so please be there. Make it a to-do task on your yearly thing. Like if you guys want this, we could certainly do this. Our plan right now is to usually hold an event about once a quarter. So they used to be every 2 months. We've now shifted every 3 months just for a little bit more of life friendliness. I have young kids at home. Taking a weekend away from them is a lot. It really feels like lost time. So these events are amazing. And if you're enjoying being part of our community, these are events that I would offer if you really want to be committed and make headway. It's a very low cost way for you to make huge leaps and bounds in your developmental process, because you will be shocked at how much changes every 3 months and how different these programs occur to you and for you when you continue to come back to them on a regular basis. Okay. Like L3, like when you're in L2, you have 2 free tickets. When you're in L3, we give you free tickets to every event as long as you're in L3. Like we do that because we know that as you're doing that work and that process, every time you come to an event, you're going to experience that event totally different than before. And you get to also be a supportive pillar for the new people who are coming in. Because even if you've done just a little bit of work, you're just that little bit ahead now, energetically, mentally, emotionally, than somebody else who hasn't come in. And we're all holding a field of stability, to the degree that we've been able to cultivate and develop that within ourselves. Just like I said with my teacher, right? Like I have teachers who are well ahead of me for the same reason. And they've developed safety and stability and alignment and groundedness that are just mind-blowing and shocking to me, and have all sorts of gifts because of that. And so we're all on that path. Nobody's better, nobody's worse. It's just you are where you are and you're not where you're not. But to me, nobody is too far gone. You got to start with these fundamentals though, and just apply, like, okay, even if I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, these guys seem to have some clarity here. I promise you, we've taken a lot of people through this work, tens of thousands of people. It works. It absolutely works if you work it. You cannot be passive when it comes to your healing. You cannot be passive when it comes to your transformation. This is an active process, okay? And you got to show up for yourself. No one can do it for you. No one can motivate you. No one can inspire you, even when it's tough, even when the emotions are running high, even when you don't like Elon and myself and what we're saying. Like, you know, that's part of it. That's part of it, is witnessing those triggers, is witnessing those patterns. And if you just keep showing up and applying what we're learning here, I promise you, your life is never going to be the same again. All right, guys. Love you very much. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Appreciate you all, and I'll see you back here next week. Take care.
Thank you, dear one, for choosing to share a bit of your day with us. We value you greatly. And as a way to give back and help you to deepen these practices, we want to invite you to join our incredible community on Facebook. You can do so easily by going to joinoldsouls.com and ask for an invite. This is our private community where old souls and seekers are able to grow and share their journey with others. We hold exclusive weekly live streams, we answer your personal questions, and offer valuable insights that we won't be able to share here on the podcast. So again, just head to joinoldsouls.com and grab your invite today. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast, please head to iTunes and leave us a review. It's the only way other people can find this show. So if it's making a difference in your life, please share the love. Until we meet again, have an amazing week, dear one.